Oh, good evening, Shedders. Good to have you here again in this holy place at the bottom of our garden. And no matter how many of you there are, there's always room in this place for you. There's always a wee corner in this shed for everyone who turns up. So just come on in. Now then, what have you been up to this week? Learned a new language or two? Written your long promised novel? Learned the art of Tuvan throat singing? I know someone who's pretty good at that actually. How you doing, Johnny? Me? Well, I've at least got an idea together in my head about what I want to write next, which is a start, trust me. I need three things in order to write a book. I need a big idea, I need a title, and I need an outline. Now, I know everyone tells me, forget the title, just write the book first and then the title will follow. Sorry, doesn't work like that for me. The title is kind of like my North Star, really. And it's got to feel like a book from the title that I'd like to read, because that's how I write. But I also read quite a lot of books too. I'm reading several at the moment, and this is one of the books that I'm reading right now. It's called Homing on Pigeons, Dwellings, and Why We Return, which I know sounds a bit bizarre, but some of you remember a few Sundays ago I talked about pigeons and why I would like to start the Pigeons Liberation Front to push back the lies about them, to save them from the ridiculous accusation that they're just flying vermin. Well, afterwards, our friend Andy told me about this book, and you know what? I love it. A story about one man's relationship with pigeons, but so much more. There's a bit of philosophy, a bit of psychology, some very good yarns, and basically all sorts of stuff about our instinct to create homes. So, if you're looking for something to read, you could do a whole lot worse than that, really. Okay, so before I pick up my shovel in the corner of the shed here for a few earthy thoughts, uh, let's just take a moment of calm. I'll show you a short clip from this week's walkies for us, and a bit of music. And I just invite you to sit back, place your feet on the floor. That's always a good thing I find, grounding yourself, and follow your breath, and just open yourself to divine breezes. I'm told that two of the most calming things are music and nature. So it's a lovely thing sometimes to put those things together. So let me begin by introducing you to this little guy here. Now, you know I'm a bird lover. Hope you know that by now. It's been a lifelong affair, but the lockdown has breathed new passion into it. And as I said last week, I'm really enjoying getting back to photographing birds. And I'm photographing all kinds of things, actually. And so you're all familiar with this little fella, I know. Well, not him personally, unless you live in South Somerset. But who doesn't love a robin? Not least because they seem so happy to hang out with us. And this one treated us to a personal performance as we stood there listening. And robins are, I think, underrated as, a songbird. They are so beautiful. It's one of the great sounds of spring. And it sounds so joyful. But actually, it's probably more a way of telling other male robins to get lost. This is my turf. But also, should there be any nice girly robins around, I'm here. Now, back in the vicarage in North London, we also knew spring had sprung when the great spotted woodpeckers appeared at the feeder. Beautiful birds. But the sound that they made was nowhere near as attractive as the robins. You know what it's like. It's this kind of drumming sound. And sometimes it would get a whole lot louder when this guy or, one of the others in the garden left the tree trunk and started drumming on the tin roof of the church shed, which is really like turning up the Fender amp for your best guitar licks. Bound to impress the talent and frighten off the opposition. We mere humans, of course, have no idea that we're living in the midst of all of these avian territories. And yet the fact is, we all need territory, literal or metaphorical, somewhere to feed our sense of belonging, to feed our sense of identity. Which brings me to the wonderfully obscure point, well, obscure for most people anyway, that the church calendar this week includes 3 so-called rogation days. It also includes Ascension Day, but maybe I'll comment on that next week. That's always a good one to come back to. Rogation is from the Latin meaning to ask. It's when country clergy particularly would traditionally ask for a blessing on the crops and on the animals, I guess, and everything else. But one of the rogation practices is called the beating of the bounds of the parish. I'm sure you've heard about it, which is a kind of human version of robins singing in spring or woodpeckers drumming on trees and tin roofs. Naturally, we don't expect clergy to be territorial about their parish. I'll leave it there. But in olden times, beating the bounds of a parish was like a form of map making, really, before maps were readily available. It's about knowing the shape of the place where you belong. Originally, beating the bounds also ensured that neighbouring communities wouldn't encroach on your land, on your patch. And so there'd be this procession around the borders, flags were carried, songs sung, sometimes homilies read, I'm afraid, and also slender willow branches used to swat the landmarks that separated one parish from another. It was a responsibility in olden days for the older members of the community to remember to be the custodians, if you like, of the memory of the boundaries of the community. And it was the job of the younger ones to learn about those boundaries so that they could be preserved for another generation. Rather unpleasantly, pain was sometimes used as an aid to memory. It's a good aid, actually. When the procession came upon a stream, for example, the children's heads might be dunked into the water. Or if the boundary ran against a wall, kids might be encouraged to race along it. Great fun. But the idea was that they would fall into the brambles on either side and get up screaming, and they'd definitely remember where the border was. If they came across a ditch, they might be encouraged to jump across it, so that the cunning plan was that they would slip in the mud. Just so much fun for the adults. Although sometimes more pleasant memories were created by pausing for a glass of ale or some bread and cheese. That would be where I would be. And then finally, they would finish up with a great party on the village green, along with a bit of first aid for the children, I reckon. The most practical reason for this tradition was to create a living record of the parish's boundaries, which could serve as evidence in disputes. It was also an opportunity, as I say, for the priest to bless the fields, the crops, the animals, and so on. But most importantly, I reckon, it was a way of affirming a sense of belonging in the community. As I say, it was a form of map making, of knowing the shape of the place that they called home. All pretty weird stuff for a bad Christian like me, you might think. And yeah, that's true. But actually, thinking about it this week, I found it all quite haunting at a time when we're all experiencing a kind of mass disorientation, when our sense of the shape of things has gone belly up. It's been wrenched away from us by this wretched, previously unknown virus and the changes that its intrusion in our lives has required that we make, both as individuals and as communities. Our psychological landscapes have become turmoiled with massive mental and emotional ramifications. Worst of all, from the point of view of mental health, we've no real idea if or when the previous order of things will be restored, or even if we want it to be restored entirely anyway. It's all very, very confusing. That said, the experience of being thrown, of being emotionally or psychologically bewildered, is far from entirely new or strange to us. Bereavement, of course, is just that, a form of devastating disorientation. The lovely John O'Donoghue, God rest his soul, captures the feeling so well in one of his blessings. It's the blessing for grief, which says this: when you lose someone you love, your life becomes strange. The ground beneath you gets fragile. Your thoughts make your eyes unsure, and some dead echo drags your voice down where words have no confidence. Well, you could easily rewrite that for the present situation, as I have, to say this: when you lose something, a way of life that you love, or at least that you're familiar with, then your whole experience becomes strange. The ground beneath you gets fragile. Your thoughts make your eyes unsure, and some dead echo drags your voice down where words have no confidence. Bereavement takes a lot of forms. I've talked publicly and openly about the sadness and anger that I felt when the Church of England ridiculously, I'm still angry about it, ridiculously in my view, required me to retire as Vicar of St Luke's in Holloway. Our therapist friend Ruth gave us very kindly a sort of detox session after we'd left. And she told me, Dave, you have lost your job, your home, and your community, all in one fell swoop. Any one of these can constitute a serious trauma. Despite the fact that I've no intention of retiring, and actually I've sometimes felt like hitting something whenever people use that word, but although I've no intention of retiring, for months I felt disorientated, lost, like someone had stolen my life away. My internal map was like torn up. And life involves lots of, what can I call them, lesser deaths. And their effect upon us can be devastating. The breakup of a relationship, losing a job, the failure of a cherished project in our life, all of these things has to be grieved and processed in its own way. And I wouldn't say that I'm over my so-called retirement, but I'm definitely into another stage of my life now, which I'm learning to relish, actually. The freedom, the new opportunities that I now have, the end of PCC meetings. I've been learning the lay of a new land, which in many, many ways I definitely like. However, the coronavirus and lockdown are introducing us all to a form of bereavement that none of us has previously faced. And sadly, for some people, this incorporates and will incorporate many other more familiar forms of loss, including that of loved ones. Whatever the future holds, it's clear that for some time at least, we're going to need to become accustomed to a strange land. And yet, I have to confess that I, for one, am not really fully reconciled to that. I mean, how can I be? How can any of us be when we don't even really know what that means? I guess we're learning a little of what it means to sit by the rivers and weep when we remember. And to be honest, I had a bit of a weepy day this week. Well, a bit of a depressed day anyway. It's that whole what does the future hold thing that sometimes comes up and bites you in the bum when you're least expecting it. I don't think you should feel at all bad if you have that kind of experience. We're not supposed to know exactly how to cope with all of this. So this is where I believe a piece of quaint, ancient, old tradition can offer a wee bit of wisdom to us. Beating the bounds needn't just be seen as a physical thing. I reckon we need to beat some psychological, emotional, relational and spiritual bounds too. We need to rediscover, reaffirm our internal map that tells us where we are, what we're about, what it is and where it is that we call home. A few of you will have attended a recent Zoomed Soul Space that I led for St Ethelburgers, and also another one I did for a group in Croydon. The theme was Hold On, and one of the questions that I posed was, what are the things that you really need to hold on to through this period of lockdown and uncertainty? And what are the things that you can easily do without, the things that you can let go of, which may at times seem really important to us, but actually are of little lasting worth or value? Hope is certainly something to hold on to, but I think we need to be clear about what hope actually means. Hope isn't about being optimistic. It may involve that, but it's much more than that. It's the courage to keep on being true to what you value deep down in the face of circumstances that you find challenging and difficult. Admiral James Stockdale, an American POW in Vietnam, famously observed that it was the optimists who died first in the prisoner of war camps, the ones who insisted that their ordeal would be over soon, by Christmas, it'll be over by Easter, by Thanksgiving, etc. Many, he says, died of a broken heart. But as Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor, says, the ones who survived the ordeal that they went through in the Holocaust were the ones who focused on what they could control and not on what they couldn't control. The ones who focused on living day by day, on keeping themselves clean, nourished and fit, and who focused on helping others instead of just sitting there feeling sorry for themselves. To me, beating our internal bounds absolutely means living each day as fully as we possibly can, squeezing all the life juice that we can out of each hour, out of each moment. It also means remembering what's truly important to you. You know, the values, attitudes and priorities that help shape who you are, your inner compass, and it involves keeping true to them. It means holding on to friends and reaching out to strangers. I think it also means holding on to your sense of humour Laughter really is medicine for the soul. And much as sometimes Pat and I have felt quite down during this period, we've also had times of hilarious laughter. I suppose I could sum it all up by saying, hold on to faith. But I'm not necessarily talking about that in the religious sense, not traditionally anyway. I mean faith in the sense that Paul Tillich described it as ultimate concern. Because when we encounter things of ultimate concern, I reckon that that's also when we're encountering God by any name or no name. I think that people who label themselves atheists encounter God actually quite often, because sometimes they're people who are pursuing issues of ultimate concern, and ultimate concern, as Tillich said, is the God stuff. So they are, dear friends, fellow shedsters, which incidentally my autocorrect respells as fellow shysters. Whatever. The point is, keep the faith, beat the bounds. And I know that lends itself to less savoury alternatives, but let's keep it clean. Beat the bounds inside. Assert your home territory. Stay true to your most cherished instincts. We're going to get through this. Hopefully to a different and better place, but we will get through there. So let's take a moment of pause and light a candle. I hope that you've brought along a candle with you, and if so, I'd invite you to get it over towards you now, and in just a moment we're going to light a candle, really first of all to acknowledge our own bounds, our own boundaries, and to hold onto our disorientated world with love, that our world and the people around us may find their inner map too. So this is a candle for inner maps and for a new focus to see those boundaries that are still very important to us and that can still give us a sense of where we are and who we are and where we need to be. So let's light our candles now. Now, one of the most cherished parts of these times together in the shed is the time of sharing in a very informal communion, and this is where I love to look around and see you all, hundreds of you, here in this shed with me, and also to see all those people that I'd love to have in here with me. People around the world, some of whom I know and some I only know about through things on the TV and those sort of things. We are plunged into a time of fearful fellowship across the globe at this time. And as much as our politicians like to bring some thunder and bluster and try to tell us that all's well, I think there's still an awful lot of apprehension, a lot of fear here in our own communities around this country, but around the world too. And everyone's sort of having a go at lifting the lockdown at different paces. I think it's only those really weird, complete deniers who seem to be going about this without any sense of anxiety and fear. So this is an opportunity to commune with one another, even at a distance, a social distance, through eating and drinking something. So I hope that you've got something with you. I've got a digestive biscuit. You may have bread and wine and be traditional. That's fine. I've also got, where is it? Oh yeah, I've got this. I said last week that my dear friend Paul sent me this pair of little bottles of whiskey, Islay whiskey called Kilchoman. That's how you pronounce it. And so I haven't opened it yet. I'm going to open that now and give it a little try. So whether you've got a cup of tea or a glass of lemonade or whatever it is, a Ritz cracker, or you may even have one with a holy little cross imprinted on it. Doesn't matter, because hey, we're in a shed, for God's sake, and we're just sort of huddling ourselves as close as we can together while social distancing and recognizing and acknowledging the common experience that we all have. But we're bringing that into the context of this wonderful thing called the Eucharist. Eucharist, by the way, you know, the word literally means thanksgiving, and that's what we're doing, thanking God for what we have, for the communion that we share even in these awful times. So if you've got your bread and wine or your single malt and your digestive, whatever it is, just leave that aside for a moment as we say some words together. So if you can say the response to me: the God of love is with you. Lift up your hearts. Let us give thanks to the giver of life. And we say together: Holy loving God, mystery of the universe, who cannot ever truly be named, heaven and earth are filled with your wonder. Save us, we pray, from small minds and mean spirits, and fill us instead with passion for kindness and justice. And so we remember the night before Jesus died, when he took bread. He gave thanks for everything he had and broke the bread and shared it with his friends, asking them to remember his full surrender to the Spirit of life and love, and his enduring love for each of them. We also give thanks today for 10,000 demonstrations of Christly love in our world every moment of every day. Nurses and doctors and key workers labouring all hours, putting their lives at risk during this pandemic. This too is my body, this is my blood. Volunteers giving time to help and support strangers, neighbours, and especially the vulnerable. This too is my body and this is my blood. Mothers, fathers and carers making daily sacrifices in caring for their families and friends, juggling work, domestic life and the education of children. This too is Christ's body. This is Christ's blood. And so we eat this bread and drink this cup, proclaiming Christ's death and resurrection reenacted in our world 1,000,000 times each day in magnificent and routine expressions of outpoured love. So come, life-giving Spirit of God, brood over these gifts. As they become part of us, may we become part of the great movement to bring love into the world. And we say together these words of the Lord's Prayer from the New Zealand Prayer Book. Eternal Spirit, Earth Maker, Pain Bearer, Life Giver, Source of all that is and that shall be, Father and Mother of us all, loving God in whom is heaven. The hallowing of your name echo through the universe. The way of your justice be followed by the peoples of the world. Your heavenly will be done by all created beings. Your commonwealth of peace and freedom sustain our hope and come on earth. With the bread we need for today, feed us. In the hurts that we absorb from one another, forgive us. In times of temptation and test, strengthen us. From trials too great to endure, spare us. From the grip of all that is evil, free us. For you reign in the glory of the power that is love, now and forever. Amen. So friends, take your bread or biscuit or cracker or whatever it is, and your wine or juice, and receive these gifts as tokens of God's unconditional love for you and for the world. Amen. We say together these, my alternative words of the Serenity Prayer for this time. God, grant me the serenity to live fully and generously through circumstances I cannot control. Hope to keep on imagining better times for myself and the world. And courage to change what I can instead of simply leaving it to others. Amen. I want to leave you with this lovely quote by Fadwa Tuqan, Palestinian poet. I looked at her house where she used to live when Pat and I were in Palestine just over a year ago. I don't know if you know, but Friday was the remembrance of the Nakba. That was the so-called Palestinian War in 1948, when Israel made its declaration of independence with devastating effect on the indigenous people of the Arab people of Palestine. Nakba means literally disaster or catastrophe, and at that time around about 700,000 Palestinian Arabs, about half of the pre-war Palestinian population, fled or were expelled from their homes. Having been there and met with so many of those, so many Palestinian people, my heart goes out to them, and my heart breaks also for the immense suffering of the Jewish people throughout the centuries. We don't have to choose between one form of suffering and another. But what wonderful wisdom this is to us. The most important thing is what happens inside us, not to us. I leave that with you as a piece of wisdom to just dwell on throughout the coming week. And now the blessing of God, the eternal goodwill of God, the shalom and salam of God, the wildness and warmth of God be among us and between us, now and always. Amen. So we're just about there. A couple of things just to say in closing. I know I'm in Somerset right now, but this morning I was in Streatham giving the sermon at St Leonard's Church, which is our home church in London. And you can find a link to that service and hear what I was talking on the subject of St Paul on Mars Hill and the unknown God. If you'd like to hear that and enjoy the rest of the service, there's a link on my Facebook page that you can find. And I make a reference in the talk to a fabulous song called Laughing With, which is by Regina Spektor, one of my favourite female singers. It's a fabulous song and a great video. So I'm posting that on the Holy Shed site, or I have done actually already. So you can take a look at that if you haven't already. Take a look at that afterwards, and that'd be great. And just one other thing is that thinking about this, I mean, I had so many people saying to me, "You're not going to stop the shed when the lockdown's over, are you?" And I really don't know. I mean, I'm enjoying these shedcasts. Meant to do a podcast for a long time, and somehow I've been plunged into it. So the shedcasts, yeah, I don't know, maybe they do have a future. But one of the things I've been thinking about for a while was offering, because people often email me and get in touch with about all kinds of questions they have, questions that arise out of reading stuff in my books or just other questions that they have. And I'm just wanting to invite you, if you would like, to ask me questions, and maybe they can become part of the basis of what we talk about in the shed. So some of them becoming, I mean, just earlier on today, Thomas sent me a Facebook message in which he said a lot of people, he's a clergyman, by the way, and he said a lot of people have been asking him about heaven. I suppose there's only one way to find out, though we do see glimpses of it on earth, I think. Do you think that that would be a good discussion or a good thing for you to comment on? So there's a thing, heaven. So it may be a theological question. It may be, I don't know, it could be about birds. It could be about hers. It could be about anything. So if you want to do that, then you can send me an email to this email address, dave@davetomlinson.co.uk. And I'm not promising I'll answer every single question, but if there are enough, then I may put some of them together, and that can be something that I address in these sessions. So I'll put the address back on in a moment, but that's just about it, folks. Thank you so much for joining me here in the Holy Shed once again. Have a safe journey home, and I'll look forward to seeing you again very soon. Have a great week. Bye.